Hey everyone, it's Rye bringing you Beginner Guide at number 15 of the Learning Lekmod series. This is going to be a very short guide. I say that a lot, but I actually mean it this time. This is going to be a very short guide on, it's going to be, the sole purpose is when to skip a shrine. I think this is something that a lot of new players will learn fast, but old players really struggle with. There's a lot of bad habits that older players that may be returning to the game, or maybe that they've been playing for a while but they've been playing the same way, they haven't fully got a grasp of. And that's the idea that shrines in general are very overrated by people, and you don't need them. Pantheons in general are fairly overrated. Be covering that in a future episode, but for the most part, building a shrine does not have to be as much of a priority as people think. I know so many players that will go pottery first, build 2 scouts, and then go straight into a shrine, and it makes me die inside, right? When I see a Pantheon go on turn, I don't know, early 20s as a tradition player, I'm going to like blow my brains out, right? Like, there's nothing that does that kind of thing to me that irks me more, because all I'm watching is them destroy their games. So let's just jump right into what I've prepared. Really not much, but there's 3 main reasons which allow you, not why, but 3 main reasons that allow you to skip a shrine. Okay? The first one is the civ you're playing, right? If you're Ethiopia, your monument gives you faith. Why would you ever build a shrine, right? There's no reason. If you are, and then there's a couple civs like this. If you're Axum and you have stone, your unique improvement gives you faith. There's no reason to build a shrine. Okay. If you're Ottomans and you're, fighting barbarians as a good Ottomans player should be, you don't need a shrine. You'll be getting faith with promotions. Important to know about Ottomans is heal promos don't count. So you have to take other promos, but okay, that's a side point. Second reason, wonders. This is primarily for tradition, but you could do it on Liberty too. But one of the very common tradition builds that we see a lot of is, settlers into granary, right into Stonehenge, and have a Stonehenge done by around early 30s, right? That's how you get a shrine. Perfectly valid reason. I think, in my opinion, in my experience, when I'm playing tradition, this is the primary way I get a Pantheon. There's no reason to build a shrine at all. So, just wonders in general. I don't recommend this, but I've seen people wait until Machu Picchu because it gives 2 faith to get a shrine, right? So that's obviously an extreme example, but wonders are a way to get Pantheons. Okay, and the most common way, if you're not a certain civ, is land. The most common wonder is a faith wonder. There's a number of them. You got Shripada, Kailish, Sinai, Uluru. I'm probably missing one. But on average, if you roll a civ map, and you look at what the wonders are, right? You've got Sinai, you have Behringer. I'm notoriously bad at spotting wonders, so give me a break. You have Kailish over here. Maybe a coastal one. I don't know. Okay. The point, okay, so I found 3. The hell? Okay, whatever. So I'm notoriously bad at finding wonders, but the point is, if you roll a map, on average, you're going to get at least one faith wonder. More likely than not, you're going to get 2. So that means if you spawn in the vicinity of one of these wonders, like this Australian player here, he's definitely going to be settling this. Not only is he playing Australia, but it's just really strong inland city. Or Axum, or not Axum, America, right? You could settle on this wheat, or, one down, or whatever. You're definitely going to be settling these wonders. So those 2 people will 100% be skipping shrines. Okay? Well, what about if you have something like tobacco or coral, right? So not only if you had a wonder here, Brunei could settle this city. This looks like a fine city. It looks pretty good. And they don't have to build a shrine either because they could be building coral. Now, this kind of changes for coastal, and when I'm doing my coastal guide, I'll kind of reference this. But, it's likely that you'd build a shrine anyway on this Brunei start, but or you'd be playing Piety here. But for the most part, like, this is an option to skip a shrine. And then, if you keep looking, like, okay, Axum, does Axum have any faith sources? I don't really see any. Does our player Yugoslavia have any? I don't see any. America, when you're scouting, you'll obviously not have as much information, but you'll get a good sense, I'd say, most of the time, if you can skip a shrine or not. But usually you'll have at least one person that has an expand that has faith on it. So, for instance, let's just say the city-state wasn't here for the sake of argument. The America player could settle like a city right here, get the tobacco, improve the tobacco, and then they don't need a shrine anymore. The other thing I'm going to mention is a lot of the best pantheons scale later. So if we look at our pantheon tier list, one of the best ones is Goddess of the Hunt. Goddess. Whoops. So 1 food from camps. This is phenomenal, Goddess of the Hunt camps. But when does it come online? When do we actually care about working these camps? Well, it's after settlers, and even when we have them up, like how much food are we actually generating, especially in our expands, to make this pantheon worthwhile? Right, we'll settle a city here, probably settle a city here, one up here. Right, this looks really good for food from camps, but it doesn't come online until much later. Maybe until mid 30s or 40, turn 40, something like that. Then that's when a shrine is good. Okay, so think about when you'd have to build a shrine in the first place if you want to get a pantheon by turn 40 or turn 35. Right, it's 15 turns because it's 1 faith per turn. So on turn 20 is when the shrine should finish, and that's like the extremely early case, right? On turn 40, I'd say is like a good turn to get a pantheon if it's like food from camps or it's something like pasture, God of the Open Skies, or whatnot. These kinds of pantheons are very, very powerful, but most of the time you don't have them, or they don't come online until much earlier, right, or until much later. So for that reason, there's no point to really rush it. So what are some alternatives that you can do, right? Because the whole sense of what I'm trying to emulate with these strategies and the way I'm playing the game, the way I'm looking at the game, is it's all about tempo, right? How can we drive as much tempo from our early game as possible to start our snowball earlier? If we're building a shrine in our capital, that could be timing when we're building a worker instead. And there is no world where I'm trading a shrine for a fucking worker, because the worker speeds up the game. A shrine generally slows it down. So if I want to speed my game up, I'm going to build a worker early. I'm going to, build a bunch of, I'm going to do a bunch of chops, speed up my, progression, how fast I'm building settlers, etc. Right? The goal should be, how can I speed my game up? And then the shrine hits. And then the pantheon hits. I don't want to have God of the Hunt as I'm building fucking settlers. That's so stupid, right? Obviously, there's some exceptions. If you find Uluru or you find Sinai or something, working the Sinai for 2 turns to get a pantheon is totally fine. But for the most part, this is kind of how you should be thinking about it. So it's all for tempo. Getting your settler out 3 turns faster, 4 turns faster is so incredibly valuable, because not only are you saving yourself 4 turns in the future in that city, but it's starting the snowball in that city so much faster, right? That worker is going to come out a minimum of 4 turns faster. The next building is going to come out substantially faster, right? So these are all things we have to be thinking about, where, because Civ is a game where everything's kind of interconnected. So if we're getting one of our cities out faster, it's speeding the rest of our game up. And like, that's what I was saying. Like, a lot of the time, like, pantheons kind of suck anyway. Like, most of their yields don't come from later in the best pantheons, right? If you take Goddess of Love, like, you're not going to really care. There's some exceptions to this rule, of course, such as, getting an early craftsman is extremely valuable. An early religious settlements is extremely valuable. Getting regional pantheon, if we have like a mining lux, is super good. But most of the time the timings don't work out properly unless we're piety. So there's not really a need to do it. So one thing that I like doing is going settler, if this is for tradition, or liberty. I showed a little bit of liberty, how you can overflow settlers into buildings. So you can do that with shrines all the time. I think I actually do it in my video. If you haven't seen that one, definitely go check it out. It's part of this playlist. But one thing I really like doing on tradition is going settler into shrine into settlers again. That way the Pantheon hits when all of my cities are settled and they're kind of hitting their 2 or 3 pop stride. They're out of the early phase of the game. They have a couple tiles improved. Then I actually care. One of my good friends, Hawks, he likes to think waiting for an ally quest or a friend quest from a faith CS is enough to warrant skipping a shrine. I think there's some extreme examples here, but the point is the amount of tempo you save from skipping a shrine is so incredibly high. It's typically, I'd say in over 60% of games, that's like a complete guess, but in over about 60% of games, you should be skipping a shrine completely. At least you should, I'd say in 80% of your games, you should be not building a shrine before your first settler. The exception is piety. The exception could be coastal. The exception could be an incredibly strong stone circles cap or something like that. But for the most part, 80% of the time, you should be skipping a shrine before, or you should be waiting to build a shrine until after your first settler. Another good idea is if your first expand could build a shrine, right? Like that's totally fine. If you've got a number of chops in that city, maybe you have a lot of worker steals coming, you don't need the workers as much, you could build a shrine right away in your expand. Save your cap time if it needs to rush a wonder or something like that, right? Like there's a lot of different options that you can take. I think in general, rushing this fixed build order, especially with older players, where it's like rush pottery, scout, shrine, worker, settlers, is just so wrong. You can always tell like the week who's gonna have a bad game by if you see one of these early Pantheons tick off and they're not piety. All of this to say, don't be the guy that gets a Pantheon on turn 50. There's a number of pretty good players and some even strong players that do this fairly consistently. Don't be that guy. Not only is it kind of embarrassing, but second of all, a lot of the utility, like I said, comes around turn 40. If you're waiting until turn 50 to get a Pantheon, it's too late. You're missing so much yield at that point. I think that's kind of the breaking point. You want to have built the shrine at the latest by, maybe you build 2 shrines, but by like turn 30. But usually you can get it much faster than that. Usually you don't even have to build one altogether. But this is important, and I think this is something that a lot of people need to see because it's really not integral to your game to build an early shrine. In fact, it most of the time will hurt it. So that's it for this video. I said it would be short. This is as short as it's going to get for me. But hopefully this is helpful. Hopefully you learned something. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions. But stay tuned for the next one.